Imagine walking across a quiet Norwegian field in Trøndelag, unaware that beneath your feet lies a mystery that has remained hidden for over 1,000 years. In the 9th century of the Common Era, someone performed a burial ritual so unusual, so utterly unique, that when modern archaeologists finally uncovered it, they found themselves face to face with a practice never before seen in the entire Norwegian archaeological record. This is the story of the Scallop Shell Woman, a high-status individual from the Viking Age whose burial challenges everything we thought we knew about pre-Christian Norse funeral customs. What we're about to explore isn't just about bones and artifacts, it's about symbolism, belief, and the profound mystery of why someone placed two carefully positioned scallop shells on either side of a dead woman's mouth before committing her to the earth. Welcome to a journey through one of Scandinavia's most perplexing recent archaeological discoveries, and the similar enigmatic burials that connect ancient peoples across time and geography.
The grave itself was remarkably shallow, barely 15 to 20 centimeters below the modern surface. That's only 6 to 8 inches, roughly the length of a smartphone. This shallow depth meant the burial had survived by sheer luck. At some point during the 1960s or 70s, a ditch had been carved directly across the gravesite, severing the skeleton's legs but miraculously leaving the upper body intact. But time was running out for this ancient burial. The soil surrounding the remains had grown increasingly acidic over the centuries, slowly dissolving the precious archaeological evidence. Agricultural activities on this private land continued to threaten what little remained. The excavation team knew they were working against both nature and human activity in a race to preserve this extraordinary find.
So who was this person? The skeletal analysis and grave goods paint a compelling picture. The deceased was almost certainly a woman. And not just any woman. She was someone of considerable importance in her community. How do we know this? The evidence lies in the jewelry found with her body. 2 large oval cup brooches were discovered in their original positions. These weren't mere decorations. In the Viking Age and late Iron Age of Scandinavia, these specific brooches served a crucial functional and social purpose. They fastened the shoulder straps of a woman's halter dress, a garment style that was virtually universal among Scandinavian women of the period. The size and quality of these brooches immediately signaled the wearer's status. Large, well-crafted oval brooches meant wealth, social standing, and respectability. But there was more. A smaller ring brooch was also present, positioned where it would have closed the gap in her petticoat or underdress. This attention to complete dress, even in death, tells us about the care taken in her burial preparation and the respect afforded to her in her final journey. The presence of these dress fasteners strongly suggests she was a married woman. In Viking Age society, unmarried girls typically wore different brooch configurations, and the full halter dress ensemble with oval brooches was particularly associated with married, adult women of free status.
Around the skeleton, archaeologists found something else unusual: small bird bones. These weren't random bones from scavenging animals or natural deposits. They appeared to be specifically from bird wings, deliberately placed with the body. The research team proposed 2 fascinating possibilities. First, these wing bones might be all that remains of wings that were sewn onto a garment or blanket that covered or wrapped the deceased. Over the centuries, the textile would have decomposed completely, leaving only the more durable bones behind. Imagine a burial shroud or cloak adorned with actual bird wings, a garment that transformed the deceased into a creature capable of flight. The second possibility is equally evocative. Perhaps she was laid to rest upon a bed of feathered wings that weren't attached to any textile at all. A mattress of wings, if you will, providing softness and symbolic meaning for her final rest. This wasn't entirely unprecedented in Norway. Birdwing remains had appeared in one other ancient Norwegian grave, but that was a cremation burial containing wing parts from an astonishing 29 different birds. The scale and context were completely different, making each discovery unique in its own right. Birds held profound symbolic significance in Norse mythology and belief systems. Ravens were associated with Odin, the All-Father. Swans connected to the Valkyries, those supernatural women who chose the slain on battlefields. Eagles represented power and vision. The specific choice of birds and wings in this burial might have carried meanings we can only speculate about today.
But nothing in this grave compares to the central mystery, the two scallop shells. These shells were positioned with extraordinary deliberation. They lay on either side of the woman's mouth, curved side facing outward, straight edge pointing upward. In this arrangement, they partially covered her mouth, creating a distinctive pattern that the excavators immediately recognized as intentional. Raymond Solage, senior engineer at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology Science Museum and project manager for the research, made a striking observation. This is a practice that is not previously known from pre-Christian graves in Norway. We do not yet know what the symbolism means. Let's pause on that statement. In a country with thousands of pre-Christian burials excavated over more than a century of archaeological work, this practice has never been seen before. There are only vague, uncertain parallels. Scallop shell fragments found in 7 or 8 graves in western Norway over a century ago. But those fragments were so small and scattered that archaeologists couldn't determine whether they were intentional grave goods or simply natural components of sandy soil. This makes our Trøndelag burial absolutely unique. Why scallop shells? These marine mollusks aren't native to the immediate area. Someone had to acquire them, probably from coastal waters, and bring them specifically for this burial. The shells themselves might have been precious objects, perhaps passed down through generations or obtained through trade networks. In later medieval Christian tradition, scallop shells became powerful symbols associated with pilgrimage, particularly the journey to Santiago de Compostela in Spain. But this burial predates Christianity's dominance in Norway by perhaps a century or more. The symbolism here must come from something else entirely, perhaps from pre-Christian Norse beliefs about death, the journey to the afterlife, or spiritual transformation. Were the shells meant to protect the mouth? To prevent something from entering or leaving? To mark the deceased as someone who had traveled to the sea or beyond? To symbolize a rebirth, as shells sometimes did in various ancient cultures? The questions multiply faster than the answers.
The mystery deepens further. Just 30 feet from the Scallop Shell Woman, archaeologists discovered a second skeleton from roughly the same period, the 8th or 9th century of the Common Era. This proximity is unlikely to be coincidental. The research team plans to conduct DNA analysis on both skeletons to determine if they were related by blood. Were they mother and daughter, sisters, members of the same elite family? The genetic evidence might provide crucial answers. Additionally, stable isotope analysis will examine the chemical signatures in their bones and teeth. Different geographical regions have distinct isotope profiles in their water and soil, which get incorporated into the bodies of people who live there, particularly during childhood when teeth are forming. This analysis can tell us whether these individuals grew up locally in Trøndelag, or whether they came from elsewhere, perhaps from distant regions of Scandinavia, or even from beyond. If both individuals show similar isotope signatures, it might suggest they were part of the same community or family group. If they differ dramatically, it could indicate that high-status individuals from various regions were being buried in this particular location, perhaps a sacred or significant burial ground we haven't fully understood yet.
The Scallop Shell Woman represents something profound, a glimpse into burial practices and belief systems that existed for perhaps only a brief moment in time, performed by a small community or even a single family, and then lost forever, except for this one precious archaeological witness. But she isn't alone in the broader story of unusual burial practices. Across the world and throughout history, human cultures have developed extraordinary, sometimes baffling methods of sending their dead into whatever they believed came next. Let's explore some of the most remarkable similar discoveries that illuminate the incredible diversity of human funeral customs.
Viking ship burials. Remaining in Scandinavia, we can't discuss unusual Viking Age burials without mentioning the ship burials, some of the most spectacular archaeological discoveries ever made in Northern Europe. The most famous is probably the Amesbury ship burial, discovered in 1904 in Norway. This massive grave mound contained an entire Viking ship, dating to around 834 of the Common Era. Inside were two women, one elderly and one younger, surrounded by elaborate grave goods, including intricately carved wooden objects, textiles, and even several sleds and a ceremonial wagon. The ship itself was the coffin, the vehicle for the journey to the afterlife. For the Vikings, ships weren't just transportation. They were symbols of wealth, power, and the ability to journey beyond known boundaries. Burying someone in a ship, particularly one as magnificent as the Amesbury Shell, made a profound statement about their status and their expected journey after death. Similar ship burials have been found throughout Scandinavia, from the Gokstad ship in Norway to the Sutton Hoo ship burial in England, which contained an Anglo-Saxon king surrounded by treasures. Each represents the same concept: death as a journey requiring a vessel.
Bog bodies, preserved by nature. Moving from deliberate burials to discoveries that blur the line between burial, sacrifice, and execution, we encounter the bog bodies, some of the most haunting archaeological finds in European history. The Tulland Man, discovered in Denmark in 1950, remains one of the most remarkably preserved ancient humans ever found. Dating to approximately the 4th century before the Common Era, during the pre-Roman Iron Age, this man was found with a rope still around his neck, suggesting he was hanged or strangled. His body was then placed in a peat bog, where the unique chemical conditions, acidic, oxygen-poor water, preserved his soft tissues so perfectly that his facial features remain visible today, more than 2,000 years later. Similar bog bodies have emerged from wetlands across northern Europe. The Graubal Man, Yeed Girl, Lindau Man, and dozens of others. Many show signs of violent death. Were they criminals? Sacrificial victims offered to gods? High-status individuals whose deaths carried ritual significance? The debate continues. What connects these to our Scallop Shell Woman is the question of special treatment in death. These weren't ordinary burials in ordinary ground. Something about these individuals or their circumstances demanded extraordinary measures, whether that meant placement in a preserving bog or the addition of mysterious symbolic objects like scallop shells.
The Terracotta Army. Journeying east to China, we encounter one of the most spectacular burial assemblages ever created, the Terracotta Army of Emperor Qin Shi Huang. discovered in 1974 by local farmers digging a well near Xi'an. This underground army consists of more than 8,000 life-sized clay soldiers, horses, and chariots. They were created around 210 before the Common Era to protect China's first emperor in the afterlife. Each soldier is unique, with individual facial features, expressions, and details in their armor and clothing. They stand in military formation, facing east, ready to defend their emperor for eternity. The scale and craftsmanship represent an almost unimaginable investment of resources and human labor. This burial reflects beliefs about the afterlife that required not symbolic representations, but functional armies, servants, and goods. The emperor would need everything in death that he commanded in life, and so it was provided in permanent form. Ancient Egyptian mummification and grave goods. No discussion of remarkable burial practices would be complete without ancient Egypt, where the preservation of the body and provision for the afterlife reached extraordinary sophistication. The process of mummification evolved over 3,000 years. By the New Kingdom period, around 1,500 before the Common Era, the procedure had become elaborate. Internal organs were removed and preserved in canopic jars. The body was dried with natron salt, wrapped in hundreds of yards of linen, and placed in nested coffins, sometimes inside stone sarcophagi. But preservation was only part of the equation. The tomb became a house for the deceased, filled with everything they might need: food, drink, furniture, clothing, jewelry, weapons, tools, and even servant figures called ushapti that would magically come to life to work for the deceased in the afterlife. The tomb of Tutankhamun, discovered largely intact in 1922, revealed the astonishing wealth of goods provided for a relatively minor pharaoh. Imagine what the great pharaohs must have taken with them. The Egyptian approach shares with our Norwegian burial a deep concern for the deceased journey and needs after death. While the Egyptians focused on preservation and provision, the Scallop Shell Woman received symbolic objects whose meaning we're still trying to understand.
The Lord of Sipán. Traveling to South America, we find the tomb of the Lord of Sipán, discovered in Peru in 1987. This burial belongs to the Moche civilization, dating to approximately 300 of the Common Era. The tomb was found intact beneath a pyramid, containing a Moche ruler surrounded by extraordinary wealth: gold and silver ornaments, turquoise jewelry, ceremonial weapons, and the remains of at least 8 other individuals, guards, servants, and possibly sacrificed companions who would serve him in death. The ruler wore elaborate golden regalia, including a golden nose ornament, ear spools, and breastplates. His body was wrapped in textiles and accompanied by offerings of food and drink stored in ceramic vessels. What's particularly striking is the presence of other humans in the tomb. Like the Oseberg ship burial with its 2 women, or the Chinese tradition of entombing servants with nobles, the Lord of Sipán was sent to the afterlife with a retinue. This practice reflects beliefs about social hierarchy extending beyond death, and the need for service and companionship in whatever realm awaited.
The royal tombs of Ur. In ancient Mesopotamia, the royal tombs of Ur present one of archaeology's most controversial and disturbing discoveries. Excavated by Leonard Woolley in the 1920s and 30s, these tombs date to approximately 2600 before the Common Era, during the early dynastic period. The royal burials themselves were spectacular,
filled with gold, lapis lazuli, and precious artifacts. But surrounding the main burial chambers were the remains of dozens of attendants, court officials, soldiers, musicians, and servants, who appeared to have been deliberately killed or drugged to accompany the royal person into death. In one tomb, archaeologists found the remains of 74 attendants arranged in neat rows, some still holding the musical instruments they'd played during the funeral ceremony. The implications are chilling. These were people whose lives were considered less important than their role in serving royalty, even in death. This practice represents an extreme version of the same impulse we see in many burial traditions, ensuring the high-status deceased has everything and everyone they need for the afterlife.
Medieval vampire burials. Returning to Europe, we find a different kind of unusual burial practice, those designed not to honor the dead, but to prevent them from returning to harm the living. Across medieval and post-medieval Europe, particularly in Eastern Europe and Italy, archaeologists have discovered burials showing clear signs of vampire prevention rituals. Bodies have been found with stones stuffed in their mouths, iron stakes driven through their chests, decapitation with the head placed between their legs, or heavy rocks placed on their chests. These weren't criminals or enemies. Often they were ordinary people whom their communities feared might become revenants or vampires. During plague epidemics, when bodies decomposed in unusual ways due to mass grave conditions, survivors might interpret natural decay processes as signs of vampiric activity. A burial excavated in Venice in 2009 contained a woman from the 16th century with a brick forced between her jaws, a clear attempt to prevent her from rising and feeding on the living. These burials share something crucial with our Scallop Shell Woman, objects deliberately placed at or in the mouth. While the shell's meaning remains mysterious, these vampire prevention burials show us that the mouth held particular significance as a portal, something that must be protected, controlled, or sealed.
The Amesbury Archer. In England, the discovery known as the Amesbury Archer offers another example of exceptional burial treatment signaling high status and possibly foreign origins. Found near Stonehenge in 2002, this burial dates to approximately 2300 before the Common Era, during the early Bronze Age. The man was buried with around 100 objects, the richest Bronze Age burial ever found in Britain at that time. Among the grave goods were copper knives, gold hair ornaments, archery equipment, tools for metalworking, and distinctive pottery vessels called beaker pots. Isotope analysis of his teeth revealed something remarkable. He hadn't grown up in Britain at all, but somewhere in the Alpine region of continental Europe, possibly modern Switzerland or Germany. This man had traveled hundreds of miles to reach southern England, bringing knowledge of metalworking and perhaps other skills that made him valuable enough to warrant exceptional burial near one of Bronze Age Britain's most sacred sites. His burial reminds us that our Scallop Shell Woman might also represent someone whose origins lay elsewhere, someone whose foreign connections or knowledge earned her special treatment in death.
As we return to that quiet field in Trøndelag, Norway, the mystery of the Scallop Shell Woman seems both unique and universal. Unique in its specific details, those carefully positioned shells, the bird wings, the particular combination of objects and practices never before seen in Norwegian archaeology. Universal in its reflection of humanity's endless creativity in honoring the dead and expressing beliefs about what lies beyond. Every culture, every period, every community has grappled with the same fundamental questions. What happens after death? How should we treat the body?
What does the deceased need for their journey? How can we express their status, their importance, their relationships to the living? The answers are as diverse as humanity itself. Ships and shells, armies of clay and beds of wings, preservation and prevention, wealth and sacrifice. Each burial practice reflects a distinct worldview, a unique constellation of beliefs about the cosmos, the afterlife, and the human soul. The Scallop Shell Woman's story isn't finished. DNA analysis, isotope studies, and continuing research may yet reveal more about who she was and why she received such distinctive treatment. But even if we never fully understand the meaning of those shells positioned so carefully at her mouth, she has already given us something precious, a reminder that ancient peoples thought deeply about death, invested tremendous care in their funeral practices, and created moments of ritual beauty that still speak to us across more than 1,000 years. In the end, perhaps that's the greatest gift archaeology offers, not just answers, but better questions, and the humbling recognition that the humans who came before us were every bit as thoughtful, creative, and spiritually complex as we are today. If you enjoyed uncovering this ancient mystery with me today, please give this video a like. Subscribe to the channel for more fascinating archaeological discoveries and hit that notification bell so you never miss when we dig into history's greatest enigmas. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep wondering about the stories hidden beneath our feet.